With someone else in the background. No.
Hi, Geshe. Oh, your son. Oh, we can't hear you because you haven't got your voice on, but that's okay. We can see.
It's my son, Chris. He just said hello.
Hello.
Hi, Grace.
Hi. Hi, Geshe. I'll call you after lunch.
All right. President Geshe.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Welcome back. Is that your first? No, you were here yesterday. Sorry. Lessons
my perspective and intuition told that his heart is symbolic of the skin or physical state. His understanding shines forth as the sun unclouded by the power and torches of the ignorance. He teaches in 60 ways of the ancient God of the power that is on the sun. All creatures caught in the business of power, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You, as a dragon under proclamation of the Dharma, arouses us from the struggle of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma. His powerful sword of wisdom pierces our suffering wherever its stripes appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. I entreat you, O Master Sri, whose princely body is adorned with 100 marks of Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages achieving the highest perfection of the Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. O Master Sri, O loving one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminated darkness enclosing my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so that I may gain insight into those words and into that explain.
Sanje Chadam Sagi Chanam Chichu Padu Dami Kapsuch Dami Chini Dide Sanami Yola Benche Sanje Jovashu Sanje Chadam Sagi Chanam Chichu Padu Dami Kapsuch Dami Chini Dide Sanami Yola Benche Sanje Jovashu Sanje Chadam Sagi Chanam Chichu Padu Dami Kapsuch Dami Chini Dide Sanami Yola Benche Sanje Jovashu Ang tu zhi ni zhong ye da wa dong zhi gong bi shi zhong bi zhi ni ding zhi de li de la chang zhi li Good morning, everyone. Because it's something of the value 봤어요. 지금로에서 한민자가 현주 민물을 하듯이 민족 술 자신 민물자는 지금 딱 저로 이기만 저로 시간이 그래서 무슨 저 로션이 뭐 이거 순진내 거자 탑는 기분 끼고 자는 현주 민물자 탑이 세나 장 춘의 술시 자는 춘대로 신도 장이 민물을 춘의 술 도와 자신 때 뉴문도 점보 뉴문도 맞점보 뉴문도 자는 일이 저기 지금 답지 싸움이 총스
So we started to look at yesterday the section that in chapter number 7 that explains devoting oneself to the practice of the conduct by means of mindfulness and introspection. We read through verse 68 that comes under the heading of devoting oneself to conscientiousness, but we haven't read through the commentary to verse 68. Let's do that now. So first of verse 68 reads, like the seasoned warrior that is engaged in a fencing duel with the enemy, one should avoid the weapon of the afflictions and look to attack the enemy of the afflictions. The seasoned warrior that is engaged in a fencing duel with an enemy that is skilled in weapons in the art of war will evade the enemy's weapons and attack the enemy. Similarly, upon evading the weapons that are one's own afflictions, one should stop them and not be destroyed by them. Instead, one attacks the enemy of the afflictions with the weapons of the antidotes and cuts them off at the roots.
There is the bio violence, kitchen, moving such damn time on the country, party shoot towards a mind, and should swim muscle chigo and any yummy that you Jalanta yummy chigoria, any new music the mom shoots Lorenza, and Chigram Jelayaji, and Chigoch and some of their mind. Sure, you show canina, and sure, Mato Chigo, Maso Chigo.
So this whole section comes under the heading of devoting oneself to conscientiousness, which means that not only we forcefully attack the enemy, but we also need to defend ourselves. So this is particularly relevant to a practice. When we practice, we may be subject to afflictive states of mind that arise in our mind. So we should protect the mind from those afflictions, not allowing them to harm us. So we attack those afflictions, but at the same time also we defend ourselves, not allowing ourselves to be harmed by the afflictions. And this is the meaning here of devoting oneself to conscientiousness.
소다 아니 전시 전시지 양 내봐요. 아니 난 얘가 가리는 거 있어요. 어디래도 얘가 가리는 거 있어요.
Now, the next verse, 69, comes out of the heading of devoting oneself to mindfulness and alertness, or mindfulness and introspection. So, or being sincere about them. The question is, what occurs, what danger do we face if we do not devote ourselves to mindfulness and alertness?
단 얘가 가리는 거 있어요. 자외는 된대 율드라드 본결나 지비 율드 넘버다스 이제 전부 천천나 냐비 지비 율드랑
In that vein, verse 69 says, if someone drops his sword during a battle, he would quickly pick it up out of fear. Likewise, if I lose the weapon of mindfulness, afraid of hell, I should quickly retrieve it. So this verse is addressing the danger of not being mindful, not having introspection.
그래다 챔버던 데스 단 천자던 데 챔버스 스라고 와서 그게 다막 탐비가리야 더 시한다 야다 베트 캔자를 이거다 간지 아니 타비가리야 소수라고 천자 살 쉬어봐요 아니 그게 천자 이유는 교구 말았어 천자 이유는 교구이나 천자 살사지 다가나 샤무 아니 징가 들어와이나 쇼야 냐치 소리지 뭐도 요말 대마 타도 아니 담보 타위야 타버지고야 천자도 추 라야기 탑시 지고라서 대난신기 아니 그게 같이 게위 내려 주기 갑들이야 미과 마제바 템베 송고야 돼 미과 제바이나 아니 지 게위 또 냠치니 아니 뉴몬비게 대마 타도 돼 아니 고급 송치니 아니 소순 점야기 딱 네가 이거라서 대난신기 아니 템바트 송고 그랬어.
Well, it is awkward to use this form of analogy here, going to the battle and picking up a sword. Anyway, here, the sword is the sword of mindfulness. So suppose that you go into the battleground and you drop your sword. If you don't pick it up and continue to engage in a battle in having no weapon whatsoever, it is very likely that you will lose. So without any delay here, Shantideva says, pick up your sword and go into battle. So we pick up the sword of mindfulness as soon as we drop it off. We pick it up again and fight against the afflictions without forgetting our focal object, which is the function of mindfulness. So without forgetting the focal object, we go into the battle against the afflictions. If we drop our weapon, the weapon of mindfulness, our afflictions will seize that opportunity as soon as they can. They will destroy us.
근데 디 아니 챔버디 챔버 쫑당 챔버 쫑추 도수가 그 같이 천자 쓴 거는 천자 싸우셔나 아마도 주는 거는 아니 챔버 쓰는 거야 아니 챔비 미버셔나 아마도 붙지 아니 시신기 잘했지 챔비 미버 쓰는 거야 베트렌도스나.
We need to make a slight amendment in the explanation of this verse. So we go into the battle wielding the power of the sword of mindfulness. And as soon as that sword is dropped, as soon as it falls, introspection, alertness, which is like that spy or that sentinel, it needs to recognize that. And once it is recognized that the sword is dropped, we pick it up again. The sword of mindfulness is again picked up.
Yuld lang radipon gilna jengi se tobi jibin yuld lembatar hejin bi geve minam maji bi tembe gi tshorna nyumu gi chom nyewa ki nyewin ji batin bi teshi gi
The commentary to verse 69 reads, if one's weapon fall out of one's hand in the midst of battle, one quickly picks it up out of fear of being killed by the enemy. Similarly, if one loses the weapon of mindfulness, one does not forget the virtuous object, does not forget the virtuous object, then out of fear of the lower realms, by remembering how one will be born there if one is destroyed by the afflictions, one quickly picks up the antidote of mindfulness and introspection. So the third point in this section, covering 2 verses, is explaining not distinguishing in terms of wrongdoings from mindfulness and introspection. So here Shantideva presents the fault of the problem with not applying oneself to mindfulness and introspection. What fault do you get when you have no mindfulness or introspection? So what is the fault in not having mindfulness and introspection? Verse 70 says, just as poison spreads throughout the body in dependence upon the blood, likewise, if it finds an opportunity, misdeeds will permeate my mind. The commentary is quite clear. It says if one is hit by a poisoned arrow, then just as the poison will spread through one's body and depends upon the blood that is coursing through one's veins, so will the faults of anger and so forth pervade the mind. If they find an opportunity of lapsed mindfulness and such due to afflictions, therefore one should stop even the smallest affliction. Particularly when afflictions arise forcefully in the mind, when they find an opportunity, when they find an opportunity to arise, they bring about all problems and difficulties. They create calamities in our life when they grow stronger and stronger. And as the text suggests here, we should be careful even with the smallest afflictions, particularly if you do agree with the presentation of non-virtues and negativities, then you should particularly be careful about the rise of the afflictions. So now the question is, how do you become focused How do you become concentrated with mindfulness and alertness? Verse 71 says, just as a man carrying a jar full of mustard oil in the presence of someone wielding a sword, who is being threatened that he will be killed if he spills it, will be frightened. Likewise, those who have the modes of conduct should be attentive.
There's a yes, Yoma yi kambing to Kula, Lam Jebala, Drochu, the Langa Pusuto, Drochu, Drochu, the Rada Toba, Tumba Dede, Sipa Chisam Pena, and it can serve with us Lavshe, Piggy, Yongala, Jigbe, and that is so Troya, that is so shoyable. Yanga shooting the lady of the Tintin Jigbeta, one turning baby driver. Baby drum that is called Gustavo Kandajiton Drogo Chomia, Lucky 90 Marco Puma Cantini, the Tipachits and Salamashiva, and Drogan Hanshingi, and changes in between change, patient in Nigo changes some of so. Geshe phone, Kadine Tondamabo Chigris.
How should one be attentive? The answer, a person that is carrying a jar filled with mustard oil along a slippery road in front of someone carrying a sword. So a slippery road, or a road that is very narrow and yet quite crowded. So a person that is carrying a jar filled with mustard oil in that surrounding in front of someone carrying a sword, under the threat of being killed if they spilled even just one drop, they will be very attentive. Not only being very attentive, they will invest a lot of effort in making sure that they do not spill even a single drop out of this jar. Similarly, the commentary says that a practicing Bodhisattva should be similarly attentive in holding the antidote of bodhicitta and so forth with mindfulness and introspection.
The Kandulaya and Lord you did Songudura, Lord you did Yushu Shingbe, Dordi Rosina, the young Samburos. Ima Lomba Jelaya, I pay in Gabos ship, and the Lomba di Nyankorgo, that is Kasota, China, Chief Sodazia, and it Nede and the Dajamba, Demo Dajamba, that's Nambali, Sugarless. And it Nimachile Gaboti, that is Kushuk Chentong Ton, and the Dajamba, the Dendishus. Jakane, Dendishu, and it Pepsalia, and it the Roman drum the Tadichi, and it sheet and drum the Tadich, two Dendishu only, and now I have Dendishu silent, and it that you Roman that was shared with Nimbuchons, Rajama the KGTV, and near Comasons, Rajama near Comasons, Thomasons, Larissa, Comasons. And Yavod Betty and Tatin Jiggle, Southern Shuchi, Pendishu, Sama tradition, then now many Comas Lana, Jajasaris, Solgro. And the insing Maris, the condition is lovely, and Rajamadi, and it can be Pigita, Zipper Jim, Suzuki, that you gave me Balaya, and maybe Kubi tall bit, and it's Zipper Jimmy. And those and so long away then Joanna and Shamba Comaris, Penacharangi, and Nigeria, and Tandadi, and Marco Puakan, and Piggy Chupuaka and tea, and Mijila Walate, and Gami Menda Suchin, Karandi, and Piggy Padu, and Kigo is the Tiwachi Savana, and Karangi, and Segins, Lavchi. Do such the Hako is Larissa. And it could so the Chioni and so the Chini, the Midi, Tagana, quick and comas. Takulava like Markusha, Mandakin Gamite, and it Tanji Roma that is don't you. That digging a court to quick and comas, Larissa. The digging Panda 2 years, this is shame about that.
This analogy here is connected with one of the stories that are found in the Buddhist tradition of the Buddhist narrative. So it is said that once upon a time there was an elder, an arhat, a Folio-den Ahat that was living in the forest, not far from a king's court. One day, the king wanted to, out of respect for that elder Ahat, wanted to invite him to the court and offer a big feast to that Ahat. And he also not only arranged a big feast, but also musicians and music and so forth. So he invited him to the court. And after the whole feast and music, he asked that Ahat if he enjoyed the musical instrument, the songs and so forth. And the Ahat said, I haven't heard a thing, didn't hear it. So the king was thinking that this Ahat is mocking him because he made special arrangement for music and singers and so forth. So he asked the elder Ahat, how come you had nothing? And he said, well, when you're being completely focused on your ethical discipline and you're making sure that in no way you're tainted by faults that could undermine your ethical discipline, and through that you might accrue negativities and non-virtues, you don't really pay attention to other things. You pay attention to not being tainted by your own afflictive states of mind. Just like someone who is threatened by carrying around a jar with water or oil. So the king kind of wanted to put it to the test. He was still doubting whether that elder Ahat was mocking him. So with a gun or an arrow to his back, he was ordered to walk around carrying a jar of water. And indeed, being so focused, out of fear of dropping even a single drop of oil or water, indeed, he was able to carry it without spilling even a drop of water. And this is where this analogy comes from, it seems.
On the song that is in Sigros, draw kanji, and in Suzu, we report to cost Tilaya Jimbaino, and Kajumazu, and Mankoya, Makoya, famous Pentoya service. And it's Sem Yansa, Chardan Kesa, Chardo Kesa, the Digina for Zuchini, and Devaina, and T. Victorgi, and Suzu in the Makiva. In the chapter,
which means that with mindfulness and alertness, as this Kant says, and we can think that really such thing is possible. So through such mindfulness and alertness, you block yourself from hearing something or seeing something and so forth. So then thinking of this situation and how it applies to us. There are certain places that trigger our afflictive states of mind. There are places or situations where anger or attachment, jealousy, and so forth will be triggered. And we might enter those places and even remain in those places where afflictive states of mind could be easily triggered. So in those places, we should particularly guard mindfulness and alertness, not giving an opportunity for these afflictions to arise.
Shiva Neva John Tamata Dover Chalmis. And that paging me Tonma, Sonjo Chaldas, Kanji, and Mandulaya, Neva Jomatado, and it's Kayan Sumasomba, and it Tematado, and it Dogores. Penas, Terry upon the drones, Chedel Rimba Damatar. The
next section covers again a couple of verses. One should overcome wrongdoings as soon as it arises. So as soon as you find that wrongdoings or faults arise, you should address them and overcome them immediately rather than being relaxed about it and let them be. So, just a second. We begin with verse 72. It reads, therefore, just as I would hastily stand up if a snake came into my lap, likewise, if any sleep or indolence occur, I should quickly turn them back.
There's the manzo pigi tachi nida nyomle se to leyon chichi ani kaso tachi dindi lo chomba na ani kiwu sorcheni ani kyo cheya pigi tosum konsum cheya bi ani temba je graduates the duzu tsaw nini ra kanji ani tawa tanji kibi kumban 미유 카드가 샤네 아니 디 람 드버치니 키우텔라 인지민지부터 사서 쇼치고 왔어라 사서 치고 딱 그저 마음 쇼치 아니 니들 용례를 아니 산드레지 해도서라.
So here is verse 72 mentions with sleep and indolence. Likewise, if any sleep or indolence occur, I shall quickly turn them back. So at times in which we do feel too relaxed with sleep and indolence, we might then completely forget about liberation and enlightenment, or study, reflection, and meditation that lead along the path of liberation and enlightenment. So for that, we need to be cautious. At any given time, we should make sure that we do not fall prey to that sense of laxity, in that sleep or indolence creep in and make us forget about liberation and enlightenment, because when such occurs, it is an avenue for many wrongdoings.
자와 심발이야 인도야 소고 또 아니 돌이야다 서서 치고야 옆에 서서 그냥 hul기를 담고 줄지 아니 심빈지 니 주도와나 니 세야 체득니 니 세야 체득니 다 지금 시설에 되고도 아니 지금 차고가는 슈고도 아니 지금 나와야 짱 되고 또 다시 마음을 치고라서 지치니 아니 니기 상황도 만들었지 근데 난도 왔어 난지 니 좋아이나 니 코사 야가지 거의 때지 냐야 베준 디소리 지기도 되죠 아니 지단 로 냠는 칭이 좀 시나 베드 노르교레샤스
It is possible that boredom occurs when we study, reflect, and meditate. So either we become bored, or we become sleepy, or we become distracted. The mind gets distracted, it wanders off to other things. At those times, we should be cautious. The great masters of the past have exercised means for preventing that from happening. So in terms of the places of practice, when sleepiness has set in, then they made sure that the meditation place would be susceptible to this cool movement, the movement of cold wind, or that the meditation seat, the surface would be slightly harder, so that it wouldn't be too comfortable, so that sleep would not set in, or that they try to extend the hands to a posture that would be slightly uncomfortable, so that sleep would not creep in. So when we then sit to a meditation practice, if we try to make everything be too comfortable, so comfortable, there is a danger that we will fall prey to sleep. So we should think that actually there is some benefit in having meditation places when you are setting up for a place that you are going to do some practice, meditation practice. There is a benefit to something that is not absolutely comfortable, so that it prevents your mind from becoming bored or sleepy.
그게래야지. 아니 이거 때문에 아니 리버 dim 아니 장바이나 디 아니 젠비기래야 슈침 슈치 이거서래서.
So then when we think of how it applies to us, the time in which we study, reflect, and meditate, and we listen to teachings, looking at our daily situation, it's not that we spend a lot of time every day doing that. If we manage to do it for an hour or two a day, that's already a good start. That's already excellent. So for at least for that short period of time in which we do apply our mind to either study or reflection or meditation, it's important to make sure that as much as we can, we do not allow the mind to become sluggish, to become bored, to start wandering off to other objects. We want the mind to stay as focused as possible, as much as we can, so that whatever we engage with in a study, reflection, meditation will remain in the mind as an object of mindfulness for a longer duration.
어제 당한 저를 좋아하는 단들 대상 저를 좋아하고 소소나데 그게 이부디가 소소디가 별로지 된다니에 이게 딱 그저지 샤리오라스 이나 티가다 인가 체슈디 아니 많이 요야다 아니 지다 소소나를 잡아라 아니 지 당한 칸데 주냐면 딜리자다스 칸데 데리카들에 자와 심바치 지금 맨도 상상을 제용하는 연구들 이 용역이다 Ninga so and Sasser China Yahudos. On the Devil Yovana, Penana, that Jason Soros, Kujachin Jigama, do water, Nunkotan, Devan, then you Mukwe Jasser.
So we have a community of people that studied with us at home. So Geshe reckons that when you sit at home, when you arrange, you sit in front of your computer and you listen to teachings, it's likely that you arrange a place that you will find comfortable. But if the place is too comfortable, you're sitting on a sofa or on this really comfortable seat, there's a danger that you will fall asleep. Or also when you find yourself in an environment that is really comfortable, this is your surrounding. As soon as you sit down and try to focus on something, then thoughts arise in your mind about things that you need to do, that you should do, that you want to do, and so forth. For those of you who have a daily meditation practice or some recitation that you do, you probably have experienced that. But as soon as you sit down and you try to calm your mind, to focus on your spiritual practice, your meditation, recitation, and so forth, thoughts arise. You start to think of what you need to do, what you want to do, what you should do, and so forth. So also at home, when you listen to teachings, there is also a danger that will occur. Maybe it is slightly different if you come here particularly to listen to teaching. So for example, Jason come here daily for the advanced study program, sitting on a kind of chair, which is quite small under the fan, having just a small desk to rotate text and computer and so forth. Geshe feels that at least you enjoy the benefit of not falling asleep, of being more alert.
What did is that? Devana, new Gauchama, Nyavadro, Tevinas, Lord the fountain to do on Chedel, Jimbe Damata, Jimba said, Temata, Tomba, Temata, the town that was rock. Tation to Juba round never, do it, neither, human woman, Nyavin GB, new to Dover Chowers.
We read through verse 72. Let's look at the commentary. Since one will go to the hell realms if one's virtue is destroyed by afflictions, one should, out of fear of the hell realms, quickly stop sleep and sloth, which cause one to withdraw involuntarily if they come, just as one would leap up quickly if a poisonous snake would come into one's lap.
There's one chisel dolce said. The Anzulia. Ko 통원배관이 공부치슈디 뉴모투섬이야 공부치는 여반자 디왕기 같이 니다 아니 자왕이 신 레벨로 소바 아니 지 이와다 어딘지게 같이 균체메바 용대지 라 난기 용대지 레도스 and that the country's dog over is so deep children the one is that dog channels the country's dog over kadini 요구도스다. 그 배준 지고 뭐도스텔라. 간다시 도고레스 저도스가.
That being the case, when we look at verse 73, a question arises: how do I then overcome such sleep, indolence, and so forth? We've been so accustomed to this since time without beginning and up until now. So sleep, laziness of being attracted to ignoble activities, being distracted to other objects. We don't need to put an effort into that occurring. It seems that naturally those states arise. So how do we overcome that? This is what verse 72 is dealing with. 73, sorry.
레자베나 네번 종어 레레신 다라 메니 치니까 다라 친도 문종 대달차시 유리 삼스.
It says, with each fault that arises, one should criticize oneself and motivate strongly. I shall act that this never happens again.
대단 아주 삼바야 아니 차단 연구요네 아니 두주 연구요네 이네 종리 신도 아니 시신이 같이 시신세 와다 시신이 자라체지 수수 상마와야 가리 연구요메디 원리기 아니 리버 드림 상당이잖아 샘나 가리 코비요메디 아니 샘 문제치 투게지게 왔어 어 딘팅 문제 체친 아니 예반 종리 신도 아카 삼성 요 토마메바니 딘디장 체친다 가양 마저 단다부터 가서 단다이는 딱디 디 샤워도 땅아 디 파브서베 상상도 지 하나 카드 껴와 상상 로 한지 소소를 맨 세난자 당이 단다부터 개치 돌마서 아카 상상 딘지 토네 아니 이 네발이야 네발 통고です네발 통치는 아니 친치 레버 덤 세죠 당한테가 소종 나오네 이거 딱 겐dim 소종 나오네 그게 다른 네발 통도스 아니 진지 레버 동기 세죠 어디 소리지 아니 상로 딱지 네컵 समय 봐 유린 성 방법으로서 이안이안도 성 방법으로서
So then looking at how it applies to our own mind. Anger and attachment and so forth occur in our mind. And with the sentinel of introspection, we should recognize that. We should recognize the onset of anger and attachment. And as soon as we recognize that those states have arisen in our mind, we should think to ourselves, alas, since time without beginning and up until now, I've been affected by anger, attachment, and so forth. And due to them, I'm still here, I'm still in that state. I haven't been able to accomplish my goal. And through that, we also develop a sense of restraint, restraining a mind from those afflictive states of mind. It is similar to the practice of sojourn, a monastic confession and restoration of the monastic code, in which in that ritual, at some point you accept wrongdoings or faults as being faults. So you are being asked, do you accept them as fault? And you should say, yes, I do, I accept them as fault. Will you restrain from them henceforth? And you answer, yes, henceforth I shall abstain from them or restrain from them. So this is the attitude that we take with respect to our own afflictive states of mind or with respect to our wrongdoing. And our approach to that is not to do it just occasionally or from time to time, but that should be our ongoing, continuous approach to guarding mindfulness and alertness mentally.
바동에 그게 제동시 달라 맨 진이장 달라 뒤치 니번도 문중 대단별로 차오 시유 상식 또신 참고는 샤버 차오스라.
So then in relation to verse 73, it says, how then should one stop them? With each fault that arises, one should criticize oneself, saying, when I acted like this in the past, many unwishful things happened, and I did not achieve what I wanted. Do I really still have to act like this? Then one confesses with the four powers and motivate for a long time. I should make an effort for this fault never arises again.
어디다 이게 딱 리빌레라 never chose 리빌레라 never chose 라운디 아니 나중에 기아와든 튀기게 아니 차와디 기아와든 튀기게 차와디 리빌레레스 기아와든 민트기 차와디 메기빌레레스 미리빌레레스 간지나고 참데 마인빌레 게빌레 참딩빌레 아니 지과 로바 로에션 삼바 내 딘지진가 안 딘지질이야다 배바 체크되었어.
The last point in this section explaining devoting oneself to the practice of the conduct by means of mindfulness and introspection is one should make perseverance in reasonable activities. So reasonable activities are juxtaposed with things which are not reasonable. So what are reasonable activities? Reasonable activities are virtuous activities, positive actions. The ones which are not reasonable are those which are negative, the ones which are non-virtuous. So one should make perseverance in making sure that as much as you can, you abstain from things which are negative, which are unworthy, which are not suitable, and to also make perseverance in acting in a way that is positive. That is a suitable way of acting.
리빌레라 배워야야 아니 지 찾긴다 마소나 아니 초피교 지 가르스라니 아니 되게 쳔바데니 이익설치에 이익설치에디 다 기체슈리스 더 제대로네감 더달라 쳔바 콤바인 인규르시세
So of those things that are reasonable to do, one of the best things is to always be mindful and to be careful about the things that you do. As verse 74 says, likewise, in all situations, I shall acquaint my mind with mindfulness.
아니 내가 대달라야 이설체 이설체체는 아니 랑더 내려야 주가디 아니 기체슈레스 달 랑더 내려야 주가 갑두라 아니 균도 있는 차봉 리빌은 데버차세디 아니 랑더 내려야 주가 주 소디 랑더 내때니 라마기시니 차로라스 디 균도 있는 차바세디 랑더 내때니 라마기시니 체비가야 and he doing that course kasata so any damna niechini and whoever the movie lenny number chechini and reveal ya jugogres.
So we cultivate mindfulness and introspection and conscientiousness, and through that we become careful and cautious about our activities, and also we sustain that with respect to what we ought to do and what we ought not to do, what we need to take up and what we need to cast aside. So we sustain mindfulness, introspection, and conscientiousness with respect to these points which are given to us as instructions by a Lama, a spiritual friend. So when we receive instructions at the presence of the Lama, we receive instructions with respect to what we need to take up and what we need to cast aside. We receive instruction with respect to what is suitable for us to do and what is not suitable for us to do. As it says here, likewise in all situations, I shall acquaint myself with mindfulness. With this cause, I shall wish for encounters or appropriate actions. So, appropriate actions are actions which were, you can say, taught to us or instructed to us by a Lama, by a spiritual friend. What is suitable for us to do and what is not suitable for us to do.
어디래 되는 소야디 제대로 니번 문중하다 니번 종나야 니번 종어 세비체도 바이오의 시즌을 남발로 소비 내가 vidala 챔버 공부 니규시 요시 삼비 공부 연비니스 안 제발 친구기 기회신이다 제공 대마타 만체자 담바드 지스 된 베네디스 헤비는 데버 차우스 제고레스.
It says in the commentary thus, in order for faults not to arise and to eliminate those already arisen, I shall meditate on mindfulness on these occasions that call for sincere conscientiousness and introspection. So because of the motivation, saying this to oneself, I shall desire suitable actions, valid according to the teachings, when I meet with the Mahayana Guru, or even if I do not meet with the Guru immediately.
That then Jabba Drubalayas, Jabba Drubalaya, Dani on the Chava, Dani on the Chava. Lanis, loosen shin the jambi, Gawa la, downward, down, Yawa Chavatan, loosen shin the jambi, Gawa la down, Yawa Chavatan, Pedujaro.
Now, the last section in this chapter explains according to accomplishing the conduct is within your power. There are 2 points in that section. Through appliancy of body and mind, one should even rise in virtue, and applying the analogy to the meaning. Let's begin with verse 75 that comes out of the heading of through appliancy of body and mind, one should even rise in virtue. All right.
Listen, the jambi, listen, the jambi, Gavala Damba, Gavala Damba, Yama Chavanis, the Jadan Nandu Gavala Juba Yaji. And Gava Chegor is Lavana, that's Jambo, Gongo is Lavana, Samsa Yaji. And Sam Yavamase, Zubodiat, Jigo Church, Yoras, Timahimba. That you some shit Jamikalia, and to Gavala Julia, and the Gashi person, younger Tonta, Jupiati, Chigoris, that Jupia, chair, so deep, and the deep, Dombros Redos, don't do living with Dombros, Jupia, so deep, and don't do here, and Toyovich, don't do Toyovich, don't do George, Chigoris.
It begins with, through appliancy of body and mind, one should even arise in virtue. So we take up virtues, the training in virtue. We meditate on virtue. And when we do that, it is possible that our mind becomes a bit sluggish or it becomes bored. And also there is a heaviness in the body, which makes you be disinclined to take it up in your meditation or disinclined to take up your training in virtue. So the section says that you need then to develop the force of joyous effort in which you become energetic in the cultivation of virtue, in your meditation on virtue, to the point in which your body and mind are completely blind to that practice. So there is that lightness in the body and your mind is enthused and energetic about it. This is the point that we need to reach in our cultivation of joyous effort. With kind of this light body, with a happy mind, with an enthused mind, we engage in virtue. Verse 75 says, in order to have strength for all, I should recall before undertaking any action, which means that proceeding any action, you should have joyous effort. You should delight in virtue. So in order to have strength for all, I should recall before undertaking any action, the advice on conscientiousness thus, and then rise with lightness.
Dirta chidan ta zongju gi tuyo ba chiya ya an le de che ba ya zongju gi tuyo ba zongju ge ge kato ta ji ni ba da shubda do ma so ani ya che ya ta ba le de ka ma shi ba ta dan ya ji no zongju yong ya la ya ani zhuo go da si ba zongju parang ge no di ani zhuo de kan chawi gi le che ba ya and drawing somebody, don't be shot for this. Can't give you late chevalier and late chevalier. Ground, drawing somebody, and don't be chevalier. Is it the TV late TV color and late TV chevy, but Chunde the Masuna and the young some towards, talk towards, Ravana and don't be on side of Ra.
So we need to develop a strong joyous effort, the one that is energetic. It needs to have a certain strength, a certain force. Not only the one that will cause you to take up virtuous actions, but the one that will definitely cause you to complete your virtuous actions, that you will be 100% capable of completing your virtuous activities. This is the strength of the virtuous act, the joyous effort that we should develop. And as we said before, the nature of joyous effort is to delight in virtue. So joyous effort is enthusiasm. It is a joy, a delight that we take in virtue. So looking at all our activities, we should then think of the results that those virtuous activities will bring, and through that develop joyous effort. That is what we posit for joyous effort, the delight that we have in virtue. So it should be generated to the point in which we're able to bring our activities to completion.
Then there is a given it to giving it learning to be of but then said, I attempt to give some temperature. Dani gave it Chavala, Nela, Chavalale. Dani gave Chavala, Nela, Ni, Fernanda, Temple, Dama, Yama Chaval.
So in the commentary, verse 75 says, in order to have strength for anything before engaging in action, by remembering the advice regarding conscientiousness, I shall arise lightly. In order to have the power of strong enthusiasm for any virtuous action beforehand, I shall remember the advice regarding conscientiousness and arise lightly in the virtuous actions without the harm of negative action.
Is that Pedin Java, that big 100 don't you with Toby don't you with Toby he on the door model and same shandy on the door models. They're not serious, they're not cheddar in Dovata, only silver on your long don't see about the penny, and she feel that silver said, you sort of Shinajin to go, but did Lava Cardone. That big, Papa Cardone, then I kept over the mother. Koran on Tony, don't sit to me. Then I said, don't you tell your one, don't you tell me, and Chavakarchi did say to it. Dogri, they said to you on your day, Kadana the river this, Chava did drink the mountain, Chava did give, don't you tell you, holy this.
Our virtuous actions need to be controlled by joyous effort, rather than doing it with other states of mind, other types of mind. They should be motivated by joyous effort. Just like verse 76 says, just like the wind blowing back and forth controls the piece of cotton, right? Or sometimes when you think of pollens of a certain plant, they go here and there, or they push back and forth by the wind, rather than having the ability of themselves to go back and forth or to travel to different places. The wind pushes them back and forth. So just as the wind blowing back and forth controls a piece of cotton, so shall I be mastered by enthusiasm, and in this way I will accomplish all.
늘 나는 내 감정을 지켜봐 있는 거, 니들이 감정을 지켜봐 있느냐? 아니, 소수의 이게 또 소수의 셈을 누가래요? 라고 얘기해. 얘들아, 저는 대바지기 봐 있느냐? 대바지기 봐 있느냐? 그래야 신이 대바쳐봐 진짜. 야, 그게 이식 대바장 이거를 이식 대바장이 뭐냐? 미 제수 장소를. 라, 미 제수 장소를. 자기도 and the budget shoes, never you ever me just go the same page number to poema, and young Sam good. Leave what big money, but one time so would be and to some also chin, never need the that and Chavana, indeed, it ever be some of the suits share by now, Giorgio Maros, Suzu, David Doggy, these ones kanji did it go
So then thinking how it applies to our mind, virtuous activities depend on the mind. It depends on our mental power, the mental strength. Like for example, if you think about faith, there is an informed faith, which means faith that is acquired through knowledge. And there's one that you get simply from listening to another person. So if your faith is not gained through knowledge, through understanding, if it is just limited to faith that arises when you listen to an explanation by another person, you might listen to something that sounds convincing today, and you will have faith in that. But tomorrow you will hear something else from another person, and then your mind changes. You will trust an explanation that you got from someone else, which means that the type of faith that you have is developed through being led or through following a certain person. But if you develop an informed faith, which means that faith that arises through a process of study, reflection, and meditation, it doesn't matter what other people would say if you get another explanation. If it is a faith that comes from your own knowledge that you gain from study, reflection, and meditation, you will not be fickle. You will not be led around by another person. That will not change. So you can use that as an analogy for the mental strength that you develop in the practice of virtuous actions.
아니 조용한 교과서 조용 대신 조용한 게 대단한 딱 저번 교스 야 먼저다 현실과 난지 아니 내 가르쳐봐야 띵하러를 tôn 주부터 봐 안지 개와 가르쳐봐야 띵하러를 야 대비부터 봐 아니 셔르부터 봐 템비부터 봐 사마고 자초도 인기치 여봐야 근데 템비 약부 소마도 봐야 and three Jan, Sami Jedovano, and could living in Swan Jena Shibangas, Jetser Jela, Majama Chibosurus, Pacha Semada, Shavior Mother, Shem, and Kevamidus. The Maje chair to the temperature of a Jam become to the same teaching, report Jim Jambaina, the Cambelia, Dingos. 이나만한 소리지. 라, 빌이야. 땅은 지금 니시 집에 가둘이야. 약간 좀 많이 왔지. 아니 자와 신지래야. 거대가나. 지금 신바지. 딱이 소리, 지기 소리. 또 늘 제대로나. 아니 그게 냐야디 야오지 고음 알았어.
Now in the commentary there's a summary that follows, which gives us a summary of chapter number 7, right? So it begins with commenting on verse 76, just like the coming and going of the wind controls the cotton, letting oneself be controlled by joy, one will achieve. So prior to the undertaking of virtuous actions, we should develop joyous effort, but not only joyous effort, we should have faith and wisdom and mindfulness. The meaning of mindfulness is remember. not allowing oneself to forget, but to remember. Just as Vasubandhu said in one of his writings, forgetfulness is tantamount to not knowing. So you might have known something, but if you forget it, it is just like not knowing it, not understanding it. So the power of the mind, should have said the power of mindfulness, which means your ability to remember what you need to do affects your training. So with a powerful mindfulness, which means remembering in a powerful way what you ought to do, you engage with virtuous activities. So we need to remember what we ought to do. We need to stay focused. So for example, when we study something, so we go to a teaching session, we listen to the teachings, or we should be listening to the teachings. So physically we are present, but the mind tends to wander away to different things. Not being mindful means that when you're not attentive to the teachings, you do not remember the teachings. The knowledge that is passed on in the teachings is not acquired.
일단 저디나 제대로 자신은 제대로 먹는 좋아도 뭐 심벌라 오는 거 대신도 개발을 쪽이 능하나 오는 거 잡이 대대로 채나 고순지 개발을 통지 뉴턴도 되고스.
In explaining the meaning of verse 76, it begins with a query. How should one act then? The answer is just like the coming and going of the wind controls the cotton. Letting one's action of body and speech be controlled by joy and virtue, one will achieve one's virtuous actions of the three doors quickly.
뉴몬남기 시직네스 뉴몬 중사기다 시직디 고도마서 직 가르쳐야겠어 독시직 가르쳐 레로인데스 레로레스 레로인데 칸레로 직여가 될 최고 매번 시송받다 레롱고 뚱기게발라 베버 차디 대한 뚱기긴 가진서고 저기 좀 시게발라.
In short, as it says in the Sutra of Close Placement of Mindfulness, Sutra taught by the Buddha, one basis for the afflictions is laziness. It is considered to be one of the worst bases of the afflictions, laziness. So who has it? Wherever one laziness exists, there all Dhamma become non-existence. It continues in saying one should strive in generating enthusiasm that stops laziness. To this end, one needs to make an effort to clear the opposing factors of enthusiasm and to generate the conducive conditions of the four powers.
어디에서든 도처만 이전하고야 아니 니문 중에 고디 직레로리스 남기 용달이야 같이 니문 네번 중에 고주디 아니 미시바드 샤요스 라 미시바드 디
In quoting the verse from the Sutra of the Close Placement of Mindfulness, it mentions that one basis for the afflictions is laziness. But also, when we consider the variety of ways in which afflictions can arise, there are a few gateways or a few doors that are explained in scriptures for the arising of afflictive states of mind. And the first one is explained as not knowing. So unknowingness is one gateway for the arising of the afflictions.
The sanji chu that dom rodi, the nasan sanji chu that dom yakshuchi, and digama chagdus. Hasana anduji chu chia di tabachia zami baina, ke jango me, and the dim baina, tabachia zambi, digro, tabachia zambi, digmevadi, Hasana, Mishiva the Tonjo Gorisla, Shin, we need to love me. And never dog over it. Number dog over Sigmado, Kaya Malaga, Chiam Mishiba, and it have some Tony, degrees 1,000 Sungudas. Yanchilia, Lelos Loundy, 자wak하니 지 아니 메제바 심무트기 상로 딥 돈다 대바이나 간 치토 말았어 간 신토 말았어 이제 그 두속에 아니 세골 슬람다 추니 부디 다 디톤의 용도 하더라.
So it's the best summary for the chapter of enthusiasm. So first of all, if we think that just having faith would be enough, I don't need to study, I don't need to train. If I simply have faith, that would be enough. Well, the first gateway for the afflictions is not knowing. So if your goal is to overcome the afflictions, to stop the afflictions, you can do it only if you become knowledgeable of what you need to do. So simply having faith, but still remaining uneducated or untrained in what you need to do in order to stop the afflictions will not cut it. You will not be able to stop the afflictions. So that's one point that you can draw out of this summary. The second point is that laziness is another basis for the arising of the affliction. It's another gateway. So we might have laziness in which we will lack the confidence that we do have the ability. We might lack confidence with respect to our ability to put a stop to the afflictions, thinking that I will not be able to do that. Or how can someone like me do it? And so long as we lack the confidence in our ability to do that, we will not be able to put a stop to our afflictive states of mind.
먼저 단 냠닝 주저 냠닝 좀 시험이 조디 탑신이라 수동경 탑시 야마도 돈 제거했어요. 그래서 대바 중국이 그게 냠닝에서 사돈 대바 친구이 단 냠닝 제거가요. 탑시 야마도 탑의 세름이 야마도 조절도 뒤낭기 아니 세름 남주다 아니 조성도서라 양한도다 던지는 준비시를 변수 조디 남주기에 제 송원다 단 넘버상기 최장 최승기 조장주 아니 삼공 지진 아니 탑기고지 레더서라
Hola, Karisma.
Yeah.
So, in short, what we need to do is to combine method and wisdom. We need to integrate method and wisdom. It is a common theme in the lesser vehicle, in the Hinayana and also in the Mahayana. Particularly here, when we undertake this training, the importance of combining method and wisdom is emphasized here. Particularly if your goal here is to develop joyous effort in order to train in putting a stop to the afflictions, you need to develop wisdom. Just as the first verse in the 9th chapter says, all the branches that taught before were taught for generating wisdom, for the sake of generating wisdom. So therefore, in order to develop that wisdom, we study, we reflect, and we meditate. This is what we undertake in our training.
카타세 예인지어가나 디티 때문에 되는거 아니 디티 때문에 되는 아니 배서 때문에 때 약시 데레스가 어디 저 충주진의 양고 거치니 아니 기치슈기 그게 나오는 지혜기 아니 주 쇼바이나 때 마스가 경험했어.
So this is what we do as practitioners, and even more so if you have taken up ordination and you have moved from being a householder to a state of homelessness or houselessness, let's say, where you have become ordained. It is particularly important that you continue to train. So if you have a situation where you attend a lama, which means that you have the ability to study from the lama, to train by a spiritual friend, then put it into practice. It's important to seize that opportunity because often we get sidetracked. We might think that things that have less significance in the great scheme of things are things that we should do, and we forget about the bigger picture, which is having to train our mind. So it's particularly important for those who have taken ordination. If you've taken ordination, it means that what you committed yourself to do is to train. So don't confuse your priorities rather than focusing on something that is of lesser significance. If you have an ability to study and then to train your mind, that is what you should be focusing on as a priority.
Guardians give you give you Toya, Munjubatans, that's on do Gaki. That Kalayam Shumba, Kanji, Rock Shumba, Gilu Yellow, and Daniel in Yellow, that Javanese in Yellows, Sunday Dizura, Tambola and Nidis, Tadon, Yambi, and Chishur Chabatan, Chava Nembala Chavu, Sigi Nebos, Sunju Garkin, so it is rock.
So in the summary to this section, it says one should strive in generating enthusiasm that stops laziness. And we spoke about different types of laziness. So there's laziness of indolence, laziness of looking down on yourself, or laziness of discouragement, and laziness of being attracted to ignoble activities. So one should strive in generating enthusiasm that stops laziness. To this end, one needs to make an effort to clear the opposing factors of enthusiasm, which are the three types of laziness that we've just mentioned, and to generate the conducive conditions of the four powers. And the opposing factors are that, though seeing that one is able to engage in a virtuous action, one does not do so, or one thinks, how could I be able to do this? So the first, which means that seeing that one is able to engage in a virtuous action and still not doing it, the first has two. Procrastinating by thinking I still have time, or being overwhelmed by attachment to negative actions.
This too, there is the Tambi Nimbo, Lutoba, Newton Jivatans, Shilling on the Tomatan, Tamjun Yikawa Sami, Pamba Chavos.
The first one should abandon with the antidote of contemplating that one's body will soon disintegrate, that after death one will fall into the lower realms, and that the freedoms and endowments are difficult to find. So we antidote procrastination by thinking of death and impermanence. We overcome attachment to negative actions by reflecting upon freedoms and richnesses. It says the antidote to the second is to reflect on how the Holy Dharma is the cause for infinite joys in this and future lives, and that the destruction of meaningless stock and so forth harm the great purpose of this life and are the source of many sufferings in the future.
That's how in Shingi Nimbo. Nibi Nimbo Tambi Chun be Shilkawa Taibu Givatan. Kawa Pau Meva, the country, then is some might give what Tambi Chun di Konale, think we are. And it can be charged more for the Namian Gil, and it turns him with number Chavata. Shema Duma, to my give Nesu Sami, a challenge in Yellow Pangres.
So I made a mistake there. The reflection on freedoms and richnesses, or freedoms and endowments, is also an antidote to procrastination, right? So thinking of death and impermanence and a post-human rebirth with freedoms and richnesses. Now, the antidote to the second, which means being overwhelmed by attachment to negative actions, is to reflect on how the Holy Dharma is the cause for infinite joys in this and future lives, and the destructions of meaningless stock and so forth harm the great purpose of this life and are the source of many sufferings in the future.
Shumbala and Sumdi, Toja Sangi, Yonten Tai, Dag from Yamata. Kala Tomaso, that's Kala Tomaso, Chaka or Pabino, Dag, but Mani Yamata. Power Kiva Taiva and Beats it, Covid to Yamata. Shumbawas, Ambu Ningo Kal Sangi Vanamka, Lam Tosin Minji, Dagas, Kona Champ, Shady, Sangi Minji. Then we jump. Davi, she never known to Sanjay Songi, Davi can travel Matan, Chishan, then we cover the Naya Kivers. Even you will never saw Tony, Chaka, Kishi, TV, Lima, Madonna, Tony, Samaso, Terra, Macar, and Samo. Something you will change Samba, they were on, they were told in the genre. Covid Domanji, Dimota of Tendi, Sinjan, Sam la Dumanji, Lusum David Gena, Ko Deja, Ken the Midland Summer, Sugar Bomber Charles.
So we said that the opposing factors to Josephus is one, through seeing that one is able to engage in a virtuous action, one does not do so because of procrastination or because of laziness of being attracted to ignoble activities. Or the second one is a sense of discouragement, thinking, how could I be able to do this? So with respect to discouragement, it says there are three. The first one thinking, I cannot attain the infinite qualities of the Buddha. The second type of discouragement is in thinking, I cannot accomplish the infinite difficult actions such as offering arms, legs, and so forth. And the third is thinking, I cannot bear the sufferings of the infinite rivets in cyclic existence that I would have to take. The antidote to the first, which means to thinking I cannot attain the infinite qualities of the Buddha, is to think also, the Buddhas had not completed the path from the start, but in the beginning were just as myself. Then they evolved and became Buddhas. Since the Buddha taught that even beings much lower than me can attain enlightenment, then why should I not attain enlightenment as long as I do not stop practicing? That's an antidote to the first type of discouragement. The second is discouragement with respect to their requisite activities, such as, for example, having to do things as offering your arms, legs, and so forth. So the antidote against the second is to think, as long as it appears difficult for me to give up arms, legs, and so forth, it is not the right time to do so. Only when I can give them up as easily as a vegetable, then it is the right time to do so. Now, the third type of laziness is laziness of discouragement is with respect to the place and duration that you will need to stay in samsara in order to do that. It says, the antidote against the third is to think bodhisattvas do not experience suffering because they have abandoned its cause, negativity. They also do not have mental suffering because they realize that the sufferings of cyclic existence are like an illusion, lacking inherent existence. Since one is strengthened by mental and physical happiness, there is no reason to be tired despite remaining in cyclic existence.
Yeah, that didn't that. That's what was done to it. None of it in your brother, Turner, Hamil Jumbo Sugar, touching part. They were two on the valley, the origin time, two give a chest. Give it to Sebo. Even the instant don't read them as
The summary verse of Geshe Rinchen in chapter number 7 reads, to sincerely achieve the aspiration for liberation depends on the practice of enthusiasm to complete what one initially studied and is engaged in. Hence, one should generate enthusiasm complete with the 4 powers. This is the commentary on the 7th chapter called Explaining Enthusiasm from the commentary on the introduction to the actions of Bodhisattvas, called The Entrance for the Children of the Conquerors. Thank you. Let's leave it here for now. Due to this virtue, might quickly become a Guru Buddha, and lead all transmigrated beings without exception to that state. May the precious Supreme Bodhisattva not yet born rise. May that the reason not decline, but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful and residents in Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Do we have that? Sorry? We do have that. Let's see where. Sorry? Go up. No.
It is there on page 17.
On page 17. All right, let's look at page 17. There it is.
Save rather slowly and teaching the matters might read through him.
To the Lord's Holy Tensei Gyatso, I beseech, may all holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. All right. It says in the Bible that all sustaining, presenting, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes some magnificent prayers, honoring the three truths, protect myself and others, your disciples. Please live long. Thank you.